Welcome to Acoustic Future. This is Yufan. Today we are fortunate to have Alessio Grancini as our interviewee. Alessio was graduated from the Architecture School of Politecnico di Milano and sci-arc. After years of practice, now he is working as a prototype engineer at Magic Leap, focusing on VR, AR, innovation, and smart city. Today's talk is mainly about interactive future and our society, including the future role of architects. We will discuss over the multisensory potential of relative technologies. So, how do you define the interactivity of architecture, and especially as an innovator working on virtual technology? It must be quite different from the general condition we discussed about interactive architecture, because most architects are working on material world and they think the material is a first task for architect.
Yeah, this is basically all of the there is all the juice, let's say, of the subject in this question, because I think that as a designer, I always really never understood how is so disconnected the process of building or designing anything, and then whatever comes after, that is the real life of whoever is inside of the building. So you kind of introducing me all of your work that I think is it's really amazing to see that someone cares so much and just like diving a lot into these things. I think is absolutely admirable, and it should be more present into the practice too. We are going toward the concept of smart cities. But the truth is that these cities are not that smart because eventually they are not accessible for everyone. So like you point me out the name of sorry, I don't remind the name of the guy that you just quote me.
Daniel Kish?
Yeah, Daniel Kish, exactly. He find a way to kind of understand how to navigate the space through sound. It's absolutely amazing to think that like we could have something integrated in that way. But I wonder, from a point of view of the architect, if you think how the process of a building goes, do you actually have any freedom in doing something like that as an architect? I honestly don't think so. Like, I don't know how, like, I'm aware that the limitations of the architect are quite a lot through the process. Like, you are offering an architectural service that is designing a building, and it remains very tangible, whatever you do. It remains really within the space of building a space, but not really of almost living the space. I know that sounds kind of a paradox, but it's actually true, because, for example, right now in Japan, for example, BAG is partnership with Toyota for doing the new smart cities, right? And they are talking about like how transportation is going to change to how to be more effective. Now that city is like targeting the workers of Toyota, so I don't think that they really specialize. They didn't even consider what you're talking about, but I think it's wrong because they are offering a structure. I'm not aware of fully of the project. Maybe they actually have some parts of it. But what I want to say is that if it's not a primary part of the project, you're really like leaving these things always behind. You're not caring about it. And if we come to a more pragmatic point of view, I have as a designer and technologist, I believe that like the role of the designer should be really not stopping at the point of the project. You should really think about to a smaller scale and understand what kind of device you want to have in a building, like literally smart device, like thinking about why you want that smart device, eventually creating partnership with smart device makers, and having something embedded within the house. That doesn't necessarily mean that your lights are going to be smart and turn off and on. It means that this thing could be also slightly detached from the design. So it doesn't need to be embedded into the walls. it needs to just be a sort of, I guess, consultation bridge between the space that you provide and the space that you live inside of the space that you're providing. I think that smart devices could be the answer to all of the questions, in my opinion, like also in the city, like just thinking about a very simple user case, like just dropping something, a specific sound in a specific part of the city. Like right now, for example, when you're crossing the light for blind people, there is actually that sound that goes like ta, 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 like, you know, like that kind of sound that makes you like crossing the street and kind of warn you that you need to cross the street in a certain amount of time. Like that kind of strategy, if really studied wider and like creating more environmental spaces, could be very powerful. For example, if you think about the Chicago Gary installation where there are all of the speakers hovering. I don't know if you ever saw that, but I think it was a collaboration with Europe. I'm not sure 100%, but I remember that there is this project that is like crossing a lot of pipes in a garden area in Chicago, and you have all of those speakers that are providing the sound from whoever is playing in the orchestra in this kind of public arena that they have in a garden that is by Frank Gehry. So why not having like a full infrastructure of that kind everywhere, kind of, right? But that's really would be very inspiring to see, and eventually not just for blind people, but really to enhance the experience in the city through sound. And we get into the domain of XR and all of these other things would be amazing for me to think something like that.
Yeah, actually, so let's talk about the, like you mentioned, the personal devices, because you mentioned these devices and the freedom to use them to interact with the building or our surrounding. That's I think it's more like a product thinking. So because architects are, you said the practice are so split from their researches. That's, I think it's also related to this system of architects versus clients, and that's separating them from the user. So like for technology, virtual innovations, is it like will provide more and more ways to operate the user interaction, like beyond the existing system? So that's quite different. There are two systems, right? The later one is more like entertainment, or I mean, you just need an investment and you develop it and deliver to the user, and market will decide everything.
Yeah, I agree with you. Like the difference between the two things, like you said, like product design is user centered. Meanwhile, architecture is client centered. That doesn't mean that product doesn't think that there is actually a client, because product could be targeting also enterprises. So you have clients too, but you have clients that are almost, it becomes, let's say that through a product design workflow, you go through a lot. It's also the methodology that I don't think it's part integrating of architecture. When you do a product design, or when you do products, you go through a lot of research in terms of, you know, like graphs, analysis, charts, anything that really give you a large scale understanding of people for building a product that is the best that you can do at that moment. Like every company, right? Like the Oculus, lower price, VR more available for everyone, and trying to achieve the larger amount of devices outside to increase the capital of all of these developers that are developing for Oculus and creating a new ecosystem. Like this is the mentality that these people are like working. Meanwhile, what I think in the practice of architecture maybe sometimes could be just like we are doing especially a building for this guy, and this is all we care about, and it's almost diminishing of the role of the architect, in my opinion, because the capability of an architect to do certain things, they are not used 100% through the process. But the fact that your client is not a large scale as much as a product design client is, so your resources are also limited. And here there is a kind of a generational clash, in my opinion, because the product design often, how we intended it today, is very large scale, mostly digital, and can really like branch through a lot of people and like enlarge the scale of the product, right? Like all of these tech companies and product tech companies, like they have a pitch and they are financed, and then they start to build, they have a chance to make this happen. How we think about architecture is totally a different thing. Like we have a studio, we have a practice, client comes in, client make a request, we work with the client. If we are strong enough to stay on our feet and make our ideas strong, we might be earning more and more in time, kind of an image that the client are looking for. But it's really like a different method to work with because in the end, what are you doing is a product, in my opinion. Like it's just a product at a larger scale, and we don't really treat it that way. We treat it very very narrowly, in my opinion, like almost diminishing the value of what architecture can give, in my opinion. But you know, that's really just also there are a lot of point of views. This is just my personal my personal thinking. I wish, let's get this out of what I'm saying, like the takeaways. Like I really wish that these two methodologies could merge more for the well-being also of designers, in my opinion. You know?
Yeah, totally agree. Because I also believe that architects can do more, but now it's more like we've got used to this system, and we only believe that we can work in this way. Like uh, when I talk to some architects, I just feel that they exclude this innovation or this stuff, these researches out of their practice. They think it's regarded like a academic stuff, but actually for other industries, for innovation company, they actually do like this, and they got investment.
Absolutely agree. It's a great contradiction that I lived on my skin as well. You know, so I totally agree with you. Like the truth is that like it's very hard also from the side of the architects to change their mentality in the system, because you know, like being an architect, it's probably the hardest. It's very hard. You need to deal with a lot of things all in once. You need to deal with the client. You need to deal with the permission of the city. You need to deal with your studio that you're managing. You're kind of burned out in a way. Like I have to say, if you want to start a practice, it's definitely not an easy thing to do. So I think it's the process that really leads everyone to be narrowly focused on just one thing, and to lose actually what could be, like you say, like this kind of experimental, almost for us could be academic, but not really, because then you see a lot of research that are published, and I just think in my mind, oh, that's something that I could have done in my studio when I was at sci-arc, for example, right? And we don't treat the work in the same way. Like we don't really value it in a very high level spectrum through publications and all of these things. And I try to do a lot of that on my own. And I think that has been also the reason why I've been able to do all the other things, right? Because I always try to bring it out and say, hey, like we are doing actually cool stuff here, and you know, we're capable of doing something that could be applied and also improve life of others. So yeah, I absolutely think that your thoughts are definitely understandable, and your work that you're doing is definitely going in the right direction, in my opinion.
Thank you. Thank you. Your word just said just now, it just reminds me of the architecture education, like how we are trained in this system. Because you know, the architecture, not just projects, also about researchers, they do with joints, with these repetitive like researches that maybe they are too far from now, like they all finally becomes just a prediction that cannot be to be installed in reality. So that sometimes becomes an illusion that makes people in architecture school believes that we what we only we should do is only prediction, not like into some other more accessible practices. So I think that that mindset is kind of related to how we're trained and how the whole education system goes, right?
I think so. There is, you know, like there is pros and cons in this, in all of this situation, in my opinion. Like from one side, my education at sci-arc, for example, as a student, gave me a lot because it gave me the freedom to really explore new territories and almost creating a new role that is an hybrid between software engineering and design. I think it's been a unique experience, which really led me to be doing the work I'm doing today. So if I have to give credit to education, I absolutely have to give it. On the other side, I understand that like through education, I've been very frustrated in being in an environment where just few were actually evaluating your work in a certain way. Meanwhile, others were trying to overlap their architectural discourse on top of topics that I don't even know if they can actually be included in the architecture discourse. So, you know, there were like, it was always in all of the finals or midterms I was doing at SCI, the juror were often split in two sides. The side that was actually pro what I was doing and was seeing like that those, even if that doesn't seem to be so pleasant, that actually could be very helpful and could open new ways for others. It's like you know, like kind of a catalyst project that opens up for something else. And that was what I wanted to do, and that really was my main point. When they would got that, I would be like, I'm fine, even if one person got it. But the others were like always trying to overlay their language, architectural language, right? There is a specific architectural glossary terms. Then, you know, if you are in an architecture school for 2 weeks in a row, you understand perfectly what I mean. Like, and I was like, I think the relation between what you're saying and what we are talking about, it's really far, and it almost seems to be forced on top of the project because we are in an architectural scenario. Like, seems like there is not the freedom to go outside of the road a little and just say something that feels more as a, you know, even if it feels like less artsy in a way, or I don't really know how to describe it, but just the fact that you are almost forced to use certain expression in that environment. In my opinion, it's a limitation for many students that are coming up, that are learning, that they want to learn something new. And I find myself doing a lot of the work thanks to professors that really like, fortunately, they were pro what I was doing and they were super interested. And that was the case of my thesis advisor and also my former director at Morphosis. So they were believing a lot in their work. I guess, you know, like there are a lot of wings within an institution, and you just need to find your own and be part of it. And like when you know that you have people around you that are actually believing and understanding what you do, you kind of improved. You might be dragged in a direction where what are you doing is kind of easily rejected or easily like is shown kind of disinterest, but that shouldn't stop you in pursuing your own research, I guess. Yeah.
It's like the architecture school, you don't have the right to choose your audience, right? When you are actually doing practice, you can present your idea, your concept to public. So there's a broader audience to you and not a very specific scope of architect, right? So that's quite different.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that architecture doesn't allow you to express your own self. Like that's really not what I wanted to say. But like I believe that no, like I'm not sure 100% about the USC scenario because I've never really been included in that. But just really talking about architecture school in general, I can see that maybe, for example, in my years when I was there, I saw a lot of people very interested in technology and often like almost turned off as almost describe it that a really not architectural, not design oriented work. But that doesn't take away the fact that they keep doing their own work and they keep being relevant in the environment. Just quoting, like, for example, Casey Rem at sci-arc, right? Or Damian, that he just recently won some sort of fund with Unreal Engine. So I think they are doing an amazing work there and trying really to provide the tools to designers, and then the designers made their own choices. Like they say, like, no, I don't like going this way. I like just being more analog in a way, but we also need to face the fact that the speed of technology and all of these things are actually going super fast. So we need to really catch up in a way. Otherwise, we are excluded by many conversations. Yeah.
So this is the first aspect. So let's go to we just mentioned the acoustic part. So let's talk more precisely. You just mentioned these sound installations like that. In speaking of multisensory, like excluding the visual, I think sound has the most complete or advanced support in technology or narrative. So I'm a strong believer that architects can also collaborate with sound designers or musicians in that way, and to work on more interesting projects. So do you think it's possible that would be a part of smart city or part of the future practice of architects?
Well, absolutely, I believe so. How to get there, that is the question. There are really a lot of ways to evaluate a collaboration between a sound designer and a designer. I think we are seeing a lot of these things happening in live events, for example. Just thinking about Fortnite or any other virtual reality experience where you are in the stages and you have a lot of beautiful work from Moment Factory. I don't know if you ever saw it. Or this guy from that I follow on Instagram, I think he did a lot of stuff. It's called Silly Gabe, and he has a very interesting music videos, but very architectural in a way because he moves the space based on the beat. And I also tried to emulate some of his work in an exhibition where they asked me to create some sort of media art installation, and I used something called algorithmic beat mapping. That is basically mapping your beats.
Like rhythm game, they have beat map for.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's pretty used pretty famously, And I think that's the very good way to start technically, because you're mapping sound to some sort of spatial coordinates, and through those kind of mapping, you can actually evaluate the action of some object in space. For example, for what I've been doing, what I've been building, it was the motion of the camera. So the camera would just go farther every time the sound would uh, meet another beat, for example. So just think about like a more smart environment where the volume of your voice kind of dictate a sort of action, right? Uh, Not necessarily say turn on the shower and the shower turns on, but let's say that like I don't know, like your volume goes above a certain threshold and there is something that calms you down, or an environment is able to understand where you are, and if you're a blind person and you're like losing kind of the understanding of your space, just thinking about elder people, for them would be another very interesting use case, because I just thinking about like I don't know, my grandma, for example, that she's home alone, and like, you know, like the fact that you want to monitor her in a way that is not invasive, because otherwise she feel um, very weak if you let her understand that there are cameras watching at her. So maybe sound could be a way to go around it, right? It could be another way to kind of treat her space in a way that makes her feel better. Yeah, a lot of things really. You can see it from social media and stuff that algorithm beat mapping. It's really like a good match with a lot of augmented reality experiences, and why not? It could be actually be integrated in more physical projects too. Absolutely.
So you just mentioned like two categories. First is more like VJ, DJ projects, and they present a specific narrative to these audiences. And the second one is the sound input for a smart environment. So on the first topic, let's combine a little bit with our earlier topic on the personal devices. So if we implement like a personal device on that narrative, like everybody have a control over the narrative. So they are like as breaking down the control of DJ or VJ into an individual. So that might be another way of the future interactive or acoustic space, right?
Well, definitely. I think that like these sorts of system where there is a lot of contributions by the user itself is what a lot of company are looking for, because it's actually the most sustainable way to create a product that evolves in times. Uh, let's make an example. I mean, the example is the blockchain, for example. Like there are a lot of people that are providing their control within all of this system. Another example might be what I wanted to say. There is a person that I interviewed recently. Her name is Jessie Escobedo, and she actually works with me. And she made an AR application for the city that is called do you remember the name? Planar, Planar, Plan AR. And there are a lot of different users that are contributing to the change of the city, saying this part could be built in this way, this part could be built in another way. You know, like I think the idea is brilliant, because you're offering not just a comment, you're offering a visual representation of what people want, and they are interactively changing it just using the app. I think the idea was actually great, and that could be also easily applied to what you're talking about, like about sounds and all of these things, like positioning. I think if we think about right now what is possible doing, and just an application that would assign sound to certain part of the city, that would be probably a very good start, you know, to 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 have there and getting starting to map the city according to a certain sound space that you have in your mind for some reasons, you know. Be great.
You mentioned the Jesse. I think you guys just presented that in last conference, right?
Yeah. She was a friend of mine, and then casually we find ourselves working together. But both the conferences and the article, I actually contacted her almost like, I don't know, 5 months ago before that we actually worked together. So it was a very weird casuality, but cool, because we are interested in the same subjects quite a lot. But yeah, she's a great product designer. You see, like she had a background in architecture too, and so she come from that background as well. And like probably you and me, she was very interested in all of these technologies, and kind of forced her with it.
And that project was really, I think it's quite important for like for the power of individual, like for this decision for city. It's very important that release this power to individual, that they decide what should be built and where or how this environment should be changed. So also about this society or public aspect on the sound input part, I think that might be an issue about privacy, right? If your device is collecting where you are or what sound or even what you are talking right now.
Absolutely, that's another big challenge. Like just thinking about Alexa from Amazon. Like if you see some documentaries about Amazon, like you easily understand how much trouble there is always for them to kind of clarify all of these subjects. The fact is that there are all of these devices work in a way that is based on detection of certain keywords and hashtag words. Like not necessarily listening what you're saying, like that is bad. That should have never happened. But also the fact that you're detecting things, and this kind of assistant, because it's an AI assistant in a way, is growing through your detection of words with advertisement, like targeted advertisement, with some sort of analysis and translation of what you actually say um, in suggested advertisement, or simply just putting in front of you things that you kind of understanding of you and studying what you say in a way that is not, of course, natural. So you're all surprised, like we like collections of cookies in the websites, same thing, right? But just in a different format. So absolutely, the privacy, I believe, is one of the biggest concern. um, I really appreciate like companies that try to deal with that really openly and transparently. Of course, technologies doesn't really help you in that sign, because like if you need an audio input, uh, how do you find a way to don't be invasive, right? Like you need the audio input for the person, so it's very hard to say, yeah, I need that you say something, but I'm not gonna kind of um, store what you're saying. Like how can you prove that 100%? It's almost impossible. So I think it's a challenge creating a product that makes people feel safe, rather than just giving away things. Like no, it's been a lot. There's been a lot of rumors for Facebook portal, for example. Very controversial product, but which actually I think is a great product, because I honestly would buy it for talking to my parents. And but in the same way, I understand how invasive could be something like that. So challenging, not really something that you can find a solution
Yeah,
in minutes. Yeah,
it's hard to balance, like you have to pay as much as you get. So you
absolutely.
need convenience, but you need to like pay what you need to train the AI or whatever. and so you can get the feedback
Yeah.
from the system.
I love, honestly, when product designer groups, they really focus on those things, right? Like sort of privacy, diversity, and health, like transparency. Like if you're recording, there is a sensor. If you're not recording, or they clearly tell you how to record versus not recording. It's like when you want to unsubscribe from a service, it's almost impossible to find the unsubscribe button because you don't need to unsubscribe. I think in those terms, the product should really give you the consensus of everything that happens there. You know, like
Yeah.
that's probably the best way.
So let's talk more precisely about technology. You just mentioned the input of the sound, and I want to talk about the output of the sound, or to say the experience of acoustic space. In the technologies we have, like game engine, they can make the sound really spatialized, and we can know what direction, what this message come from. Um, so I strongly believe that would be a way of constructing the sound navigation for city, or it's more like how to serve these people who is visually impaired. Like you also mentioned the word orchestration in last email. I think to build such a complex environment, the orchestration is very important, because the architect is just one role of the whole system. So what other important roles do you think there are also used for this system?
Well, I'd like to start from an example of a workshop I've been lucky to be working on, and it was held at the Holodome space in Venice. I don't know if you ever experienced the Holodome, but the Holodome is a structure that is a dome, and you have like all of the projections around it that are projected inside of the cage, and you have like the sound that is coming out from the ground. So you really need this, you feel the subwoofer when it's like vibrating, like when there is a bass and it's like, and it's just you feel it like almost in your bones, because like it's coming up from the ground, contrarily to have like speakers around it. I think is great. And like you say, the spatialized audio is would be probably the best way to have. I don't know, like for example, we have a street and you have all of this, like we have lights today, you could have like speakers, and the sound could come from a specific part of the city, and not necessarily you need a source of sound from there specifically, but you actually could have it like specialized, like you actually said. I think that's a great idea, and that would be a very nice way to start targeting cities in that way. I think that also that you should really look into that project in Chicago. And I also know sound engineering from Europe. Then maybe he is more definitely more expert about these things, and he works really for sound and in engineering when for more like of this sort of project, like these urban projects. So absolutely, I think that like uh, a step forward in the picture would be trying to understand what kind of sounds and why, like trying to understand like how you subdivide the cities. Are you subdividing it through services? Are you subdividing it through public spaces? Are you trying to understand location which are safe for blind people? Are you what are you targeting? Like what kind of navigation are you targeting there? Like you wanna make like a blind person going from point A to point B safely, according certain things that, and the help come from this kind of sound experience. So I really wonder if you like how I would target a project of this kind. I really like just take a use case of part of the city, and I will probably took a very challenging one. For example, if you're based in LA, you will see the big works that they are doing in Little Tokyo, for example. Like that part, walking that part is pretty scary. If I were blind, I would probably try to avoid it, because it's very unpredictable. So how can you predict what is not predictable in a city of this kind, with these conditions? Like I really think in terms of conditions, use case, infrastructure. Like that's probably the main keys to try to start something. I'm not even sure if there are references for this project that are better than the one I provided, because like as I said, my focus is really AR, VR, and Unity, and not really like only sound.
That reminds me of, like, you mentioned actually what actually this space look like or sound like. Uh, is LiDAR, whatever, the AR kit or AR core, the depth sensoring of the camera, would that be an important way to like transform the real space into another message? Because the space is just a data, it can be both visual and acoustic messages.
Well, that could be a very good way to kind of well, let's think it in this way. Like when you are targeting or when you're trying to recognize something, you have a set of tools at your disposal. For example, the LiDAR comes very handy for understanding features of the space which you're living in, or feature of the, if you took a look at the updated AR on GPS SDK, no, sorry, not SDK, but basically Apple released, thanks to LiDAR, thanks to kind of scanning, they understand what kind of position you are in the city when you are framing something. So you're not just basing your guessing on image recognition, but you're also basing your guessing on reconstruction of the space and trying to get a match from it. So that really kind of changes the rules of the game, because you have data that is much more reliable in a way, if we want to call it that way, that is based on the space that is being reconstructed. So if you also, on the top of it, you overlap sound as a confirmation of that space, that could be actually a great feature to have, right? Or any kind of device that you find in that place specifically, that you're verifying a certain distance with it, or you're verifying a certain sound matching, for example, like if the wavelength of the sound match with the one that you're looking for, so it's actually, yes, that's the space that we are in. There is a lot of possibilities, honestly.